It's a new day on Deep Space Nine, and Martok, husband of Sorella, has had a bit of an oopsie. A training accident in a holosuite, he says, with the safeties off, obviously, and he thinks his injury proves how much he needs the practice after 2 years imprisoned on that Jem'Hadar Alcatraz droid. The cause isn't entirely honest, though. It was training, like he said, but with Worf. Klingons believe in drawing blood during exercises, presumably considering it an incentive to get better. More exercise will have to wait, though, as Martok, husband of Sorella, has been given a mission to go and check on a missing Klingon ship near the Cardigan border. The Dominion have been a bit trigger-happy, apparently, so he's assuming things went pear-shaped for them. All the more reason to take someone you trust, which is why he's inviting Worf to be his first officer. Sisko's fine with the idea, possibly as a way of trying to repair the damage our recent ding-dong with the Klingons did. That means everybody else taking on Worf's duties while he's away, which might be why Dax decides to dodge the extra work by buggering off with them as well. The ship needed extra crew, and Curzon's prior Klingon knowledge makes Dax a good choice, so she'll be in charge of science bollocks. Curzon Dax is a name known to some of the crew, and particularly well known by the mother of one of them, so Dax settles in well enough. Worf somewhat less so, as he's displeased by the crew's lack of victories. It's a feeling shared by some of the crew themselves, which might be why one in particular is upset over being told by Martok, husband of Sorella, that our orders are to avoid contact where possible. A scouting mission may be what the Empire needs, but it's clearly not what those involved want. What they want and what they're able to handle may be two different things. Each time this crew has faced the Jem'Hadar, they've been met with defeat, and Martok, husband of Sorella, is concerned they now consider that normal. It would certainly explain the mood among the crew. Dax is doing what she can to raise spirits, and bringing some barrels of booze along was a pretty good start, but there are still many aboard who consider this ship cursed. A Jem'Hadar ship in our path, one which doesn't seem to know we're here due to sneaky bastard mode, offers a tempting target. So tempting, in fact, that even Worf is confused when Martok, husband of Sorella, insists on allowing it to leave and continuing with our mission. Dax is of the opinion that not destroying it was a mistake and says as much to Worf afterwards. It may not have been their orders, but an easy win would have banished any talk of a curse and the crew's morale problems with it. Martok, husband of Sorella, isn't particularly impressed with Worf questioning his orders on the bridge. He thinks the fight could have led to days of dodging reinforcements and interfered with their real job. Worf's not convinced, but agrees to support his decisions. That level of support isn't shared by the rest of the crew. One thinks Martok, husband of Sorella, is afraid of the Jem'Hadar, a statement that turns into a fight. The guy who tries to break it up takes the worst beating, so Dax does a bit of pooping to restore order. The experience uses up the last of her patience, and she's blunt with Worf when he checks on her. Worf's loyalty to Martok, husband of Sorella, is all well and good, but overlooking his piss-poor decisions isn't, especially when they might have less to do with the mission itself than how he spent the last 2 years. If Worf doesn't force the issue, the crew might do it for him, at least the ones who are left after the fighting stops. We've received a distress signal from the ship we're out here to find. Attacked and damaged according to the repeating message, but with survivors. Off Worf goes to inform Martok, husband of Sorella, so he's not around when the Klingon who's friendly with Dax warns her that shit might kick off soon. She's the partner of the guy Dax saved from more than just a beating during the brawl, and wants to repay the favor by protecting Dax if things go south. That's a real possibility if Martok, husband of Sorella, carries on being so cagey. He suspects this whole thing is a trap and ignores Worf's alternative explanations before starting a rant about the Jem'Hadar that essentially equates them to boogeymen. He's becoming quite agitated before Worf manages to calm him down by saying there's no point in trying to guess anything without having a look, so we do that. Some good news at last, and the ship is still in one piece. It's a heavily fucked up piece, I'll grant you, but a piece nonetheless. Worf gives orders to prepare a boarding party and look for survivors, only for Martok, husband of Sorella, to stop him. The ship is just over the Cardigan border, and he's imagining how many Jem'Hadar ships might be waiting for us to show up. Worf points out they've not cared which side of the border their targets have been on before, and that their orders to not cross it didn't account for potential survivors, but Martok, husband of Sorella, won't budge. With a threat that anybody else questioning his orders will be viewed very poorly indeed, he leaves. All of which convinces Worf that Dax might have had a point, and the only way to salvage this whole thing is to take command himself. Assuming he gets the chance, the lads who were fighting earlier are now in agreement that Martok, husband of Sorella, is a bloody liability, and they have some support. Worf telling them to shut their cake holes doesn't have much effect, but revealing some armed guards led by the guy Dax helped out earlier does the trick. Besides, such a mutiny would be pointless anyway, as Worf already intends to do what they want and prepares to cross the border. The alarm brings Martok, husband of Sorella, to the bridge, and he's not impressed. He's even less impressed when Worf challenges him to become captain, and they have a bit of a knifey wrestle while everybody watches. First blood goes to Worf, but he loses the fight when he takes a shiv to the belly, and Martok, husband of Sorella, celebrates his victory, along with the crew who are apparently now 100% behind him. Just as well, really, as a Jem'Hadar ship is on the way, and Martok, husband of Sorella, has no intention of running from it, now he's got his taste for victory back. Back on Deep Space Nine, we're receiving a call from an incoming Klingon ship. Martok, husband of Sorella, has rescued survivors from the ship he went out to find, and knocked the shit out of some Jem'Hadar while he was at it. He finds Worf in Quark's bar sometime later and joins him to deliver the news from the Klingon High Council. Everybody involved is getting an official pat on the back for what happened. More than that, though, Martok, husband of Sorella, has thought about what Worf did, and now understands why, including the bit where Worf deliberately lowered his guard to throw the fight. That deserves more than a simple pat on the back, he thinks. Worf may not have a house of his own now after Gowron Bandit, but he's welcome to instead join the House of Martok, House of Husband of Sorella. A new pin badge for his sash seals the deal, so we'll leave Worf to come to terms with having a whole new family until the next adventure. Spending 2 years getting your ass handed to you, something that essentially amounts to regular ritual torture, is going to have a long-term effect. Even if Martok, husband of Sorella, hadn't lost an eye due to it, the psychological damage inflicted would be significant. The Jem'Hadar had succeeded in breaking him. His subsequent so-called insight into the Jem'Hadar, one that makes him see meaning where none exists, is a good example of the result. Like the ship's crew, his expectation of defeat is a learned response, one physically beaten into him just as it was beaten into the crew by sustaining regular casualties. The psychological impact of conflict going poorly on a species whose identity revolves around that very conflict is a topic worth investigating. Every saga of a Klingon victory must, by simple logic, be connected with a similar experience of defeat for the opposition. Well, the ones that are true anyway, as we're familiar with the Klingon propensity for spicing up a story. The idea is still a valid one, though. What happens when a society focused on victory stops achieving it? Can an enemy who understands Klingon psychology use it to undermine them? Were those arena fights purely for the purpose of understanding military skill, or a more insidious idea by the Vorta, one designed to show Jem'Hadar they'll eventually succeed, and anybody else that they'll eventually fail? 2 years is long enough to have seen whatever Martok, husband of Sorella, had to offer in martial skill, so why was he still there? It seems somewhat of a stretch to suggest breaking him was the prelude to something more, even with him being an advisor to Gowron himself, but, well, look at the result. His first command position upon being freed nearly resulted in mutiny, a fate only averted by a joint effort from Dax and Worf. A dead man is a martyr. A broken man is a liability at best, and a means to spread fear at worst. If news had reached the Empire that one of their most celebrated heroes was paralyzed by fear and needed putting down by his own crew, the Jem'Hadar would become more powerful in the eyes of every Klingon without even firing a shot. Put in those terms, it sounds exactly like the sort of psychological warfare the Vorta or Founders would have been happy to employ. And on the topic of psychology, points to whoever considered the culmination of the story. Martok, husband of Sorella, beating Worf as a catalyst for confidence is either the result of a little research or a happy coincidence. Victory and defeat have a physical effect on the body, altering the production of neurotransmitters in your brainial meat. Martok, husband of Sorella, being handed a win, and the subsequent boost in happy juices making him more inclined to fight the Jem'Hadar ship, does have a basis in scientific theory. That comes with the standard caveat of this being based on human biology, of course, but this is Star Trek, so unless it's been explicitly stated as different, assuming it's the same is a safe bet. Martok, husband of Sorella, isn't the only one who regains something this episode, though, is he? Worf now has a house again, and that raises a few questions. If the House of Morg was essentially dismantled because Worf pissed off Gowron, and Worf became dishonoured in the eyes of all Klingons as a result, how does this affect any house he's invited to join? Just because Worf was proven right about the Klingon invasion being a mistake doesn't make it all go away. The third episode of this season had him still considered tainted even after we saved Gowron's ass. Granted, that treatment was largely for show and there was no real animosity, a sign perhaps of how many people thought Gowron was a proper dickbag for what he did, but it's there all the same. It seems odd then that a member of a dishonoured house could subsequently join another, but there is an element of logic to it. Casting out an entire group of people for the actions of one family member is pretty wasteful, so allowing other families to take in who they choose and give them a clean slate provides an option to reintegrate some of them. Or, as is the case here, perhaps it offers houses a chance to redress what they consider an injustice performed by those in power. Maybe those in power can even use it themselves. Suggesting another house should take in outcasts is a way to fix their own errors without needing to formally acknowledge fault, allowing leaders to make corrections without the perceived weakness of backing down. We're deep into the realm of political bollocks again, something I enjoy throwing ideas at to see what sticks. For a culture so themed around combat, considering how they deal with anything that doesn't involve punching or stabbing offers a fun diversion. End of episode.
Bloody typical. 70,000 light years away and Leola root is still buggering up me life.
It was one of the main sources of food on Voyager.
Don't remind me, son. I can still taste it in me sleep.
If we're going to properly recreate the exact urine from your first teleporter accident, we'll need to figure out a source or a replacement.
Well, a source is out the question. Voyager won't be back for another 5 years, and the crew jettison all the Leola route the day after Neelix leaves.
I'm told they scoured the entire ship on a molecular level to make sure none of it remained, which is why we're going to need a replacement.
All right then, son. I assume as the computer of Voyager that you gave the stuff a proper science in and know what's in it.
Actually, the stuff proved surprisingly resilient to scans. Everything I learned was via first-hand accounts from the crew.
And what did they say?
They all agreed it tasted like a gopher's asshole. Woof.